Hello everybody, welcome back to another Commander Deck Tech video. We have a brand new commander from Modern Horizons 2 and I really wanted to check her out. We have Sythis, Hand of the Harvest. Sythis or Sythis. She is a 2-mana green and white legendary enchantment creature nymph. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. She's a 1/2. This ability is very common. We've seen this before on several Enchantress cards, where the act of casting an enchantment spell will draw you a card. Now this is very beneficial. If you're playing a commander game, it's so easy to play a lot of spells and you end up with few cards left in your hand. Playing this kind of deck makes it almost a sure thing that your hand will remain full. You may not have the most powerful creatures out there, but these enchantresses were not meant to be super strong, they're just meant to keep your hand full. So every time you cast an enchantment spell, you want to draw a card, you want to keep your hand full. Now, I have this broken up into different categories for different card types, just because I think it's a little bit easier. Most of the cards here are going to be enchantments anyway. Planeswalkers, I have Calyx Destiny's Hand, a very underplayed Planeswalker, dirt cheap as you can see, under $2. +1 says, look at the top 4 cards of your library, you may reveal an enchantment card from among them and put that card into your hand, and the rest on the bottom in a random order. That right there is pretty solid. As far as pluses go, it's going to synergize with an enchantment deck in green and white. The -3 is exile target creature or enchantment you don't control until target enchantment you control leaves the battlefield, so it's kind of like an Oblivion Ring effect. And the alt is return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is really why he's in here. All of those abilities are going to synergize with enchantments, and I only really go for Planeswalkers that will synergize with all of their abilities. So going on to creatures here, we have 27, and I mean that's kind of the underrated thing about this deck is that you can play a lot of enchantment creatures. We have Alseid of Life's Bounty for 1 white mana. You get a creature that can sack itself for 1 mana. Target creature or enchantment you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Aegis of the Gods, you have hexproof, so it's a great way to protect yourself. Believe it or not, there are a lot of spells that do target players. We have Argothian Enchantress. This is the first one we have to talk about outside of our commander. Basically just the Shroud version of what she does. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you draw a card. Destiny Spinner, creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. So that's really why she's in here, just to protect our spells, make them uncounterable. Femiref Enchantress is basically another enchantress, but instead of having them cast, whenever an enchantment is put into any graveyard from play, you get to draw a card. We have Herald of the Pantheon. Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life. Another new card here, Sanctum Weaver. You can tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. So basically like a Serra's Sanctum, but on a tap ability. We have Starfield Mystic, basically like another Herald of the Pantheon. Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on them. We have Courser of Krufix here. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You can play the top card if it's a land, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. We have Dryad of the Elysian Grove. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So both of these, Courser of Krufix and Dryad, they're not necessarily enchantment focused, but because they're enchantment creatures and they're just good overall creatures, it's not going to hurt us if we play them because we're still going to draw cards in addition to everything else that we're doing. Eternal Witness, just to get back something from our graveyard, doesn't matter what it is. Mesa Enchantress, just to draw more cards. Monk Idealist, basically Eternal Witness, but for our enchantments. We have Satyr Enchanter, another enchantress. We have Citizen Champion, another enchantress, but also has the ability to put +1/+1 counters on itself. And we have Verduran Enchantress, yet again, another enchantress. We draw cards whenever we play enchantments. And then we have token producers here. We have a Johnny's Chosen. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we create a 2/2 white cat creature token. If that enchantment is an aura, we may attach it to the token. And then we have Arasta of the Endless Web. Reach, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we create a 1/2 green spider creature token with Reach. So something that's just going to sit out there and give us a board presence. And then we have Archon of Sun's Grace. Pegasus creatures we control have lifelink, and Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, we get a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying. So kind of like a better Johnny's Chosen. I mean, it's better in just about every way. We get better keywords. You get flying and lifelink tokens, that's just brilliant. And then we have Eidolon of Blossoms because if you didn't get enough enchantresses, here you have one that's even better because it's on ETB and it counts itself. So you're just going to keep drawing cards. It's crazy. And then we have Heliod, God of the Sun. Really in here because it gives our creatures vigilance. That's such a good thing, such an underrated thing to have on this creature that's indestructible. If you don't have the devotion, it's just an enchantment, but it's still an indestructible enchantment that gives all of your creatures vigilance. And Nylea is kind of the same deal. Worst case scenario, she's just going to sit out there and your creatures have trample. And we have Celestial Ancient. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this is potentially a win con if we just keep putting more counters on all of our creatures. It gets out of control, combat becomes a lot easier, and we have Karametra, God of Harvests. To really complement the Enchantress strategy, each time you play a creature, you may search your library for a forest or plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped. We have Sun Titan, which is never a bad card to play in an enchantment deck because a lot of our enchantments are going to be cheap permanents that cost 3 mana or less. We have Nylea's Colossus, another great constellation trigger. We can pretty much double the power and toughness of a creature we control each time that happens, and makes it very easy to one-shot an opponent. And then we have Archetype of Endurance to wrap it up for the creatures. Creatures we control have hexproof, and creatures our opponents control lose hexproof and can't have or gain hexproof. We have a couple sorceries in here, Idyllic Tutor and Plea for Guidance. Basically, Idyllic Tutor is 1/2 of Plea for Guidance, or Plea for Guidance is 2 times Idyllic Tutor, however you want to view that, but they serve the same purpose. We tutor for our enchantments. We have some instants in here. We have Enlightened Tutor, another enchantment tutor. We have Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshares for removal. We have Eladamri's Call, so we can tutor up a creature at instant speed. And then we have Heroic Intervention to serve as some sort of protection, hexproof and indestructible for all of our permanents until end of turn. And then we have Beast Within for even more removal. We have some more removal in here, but that's on enchantment, so don't worry about that. Our artifacts are pretty simple. We have Helm of the Gods, so we get more power and toughness to a creature for each enchantment we control. We have Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and Celestia Signet for mana rocks. Don't need too many of them because we get a lot of mana off of our enchantments. Speaking of which, now we have Utopia Sprawl, enchant a forest. You choose a color. Whenever you tap that forest, it produces that color of mana as well. We have Wild Growth. Whenever the enchanted land is tapped for mana, it gives you an extra green. And then we have Darksteel Mutation, which is arguably better than removal if you're putting this on a commander, because it'll pretty much just make it useless and indestructible. And then we have Fertile Ground. Whenever an enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana of any color to their mana pool. We have Sterling Grove. Other enchantments we control have Shroud, and it's a enchantment tutor. We can sacrifice it, get an enchantment, and put it on top of our library. We have Aura Shards to get rid of our opponent's artifacts and enchantments whenever we have a creature come into play. We have Aura of Silence to make it harder for our opponents to play artifacts and enchantments. We can sacrifice it to destroy one too. And then we have Banishing Light and Grasp of Fate, and we have Oblivion Ring, all to pretty much do the same thing. We want to exile our opponent's non-land permanents, and these are the best ways of doing it. We have Enchantress's Presence, basically the same idea. Whenever we cast an enchantment, we draw a card. We have Ghostly Prison to make it harder for our opponents to attack us. We have Karmic Guide. If they destroy a non-creature permanent we control, we may destroy target permanent that player controls. So if they want to go after our stuff, we can then just target a lot of things that they control and make it very unpleasant for them, kind of to serve as a reminder to never do it again. And we have Overgrowth. Enchant a land. Whenever the land is tapped for mana, its controller adds 2 extra green. We have Solitary Confinement for more protection, and because we're playing an Enchantress deck, we don't have to worry about drawing cards or running out of card draw. We have Shroud. We skip our draw step at the beginning of our upkeep. We sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless we discard a card. We prevent all damage that would be dealt to us. So, as long as this is out, we're pretty much untouchable. We have Song of the Dryads, kind of the same idea as with Darksteel Mutation. We make the enchanted permanent a colorless forest, so it loses its abilities, and it's just a land that'll tap for mana. And we have Guardian Project, another great card for Enchantress decks because it's an enchantment that rewards you for playing your creatures by giving you card draw. We have Smothering Tithe because, hey, if you're running out of mana, you get treasure tokens here. We have Mirari's Wake to double our mana, and we have Privileged Position. Other permanents we control can't be the targets of spells or abilities our opponents control. We have Sigil of the Empty Throne. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we get a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. And then we have Sphere of Safety. Creatures can't attack us unless their controller pays X mana, where X is the number of enchantments we control. And then we have Starfield of Nyx, pretty much to help us get our enchantments back from our graveyard, but as long as we control 5 or more enchantments, each other non-aura enchantment we control is a creature in addition to its other types, and has base power and toughness, each equal to its converted mana cost. And our lands are pretty much just your basic mana fixing. We do have some utility lands in here. We have Reliquary Tower to make it easy for us to keep our hand. We're going to be drawing a bunch of cards we don't want to have to discard. Gavany Township. Sometimes we don't have a lot to do in this deck, so if you want to, you can just dump a bunch of +1/+1 counters onto your creatures, so at least you can win out in combat. We have Hall of Heliod's Generosity, basically Volrath's Stronghold for enchantments. So anyway, let me know what you think about Sythis. I think this is a very cool commander option, a lot of potential, not just in Modern, but because she's so cheap, it makes it so easy for this kind of deck to get off to a quick start. So anyway, let me know what you think about this deck in the comment section below. The link to it will be in the description. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, check out my new merch. Void here signing off. Have a wonderful day.